Hi, everybody. My name is Ed. I am a freelance slash part-time, full-time UX designer, and I am here to kind of talk about user experience for indie game development. So here's the outline for the talk. First, I'll give you a brief introduction on my background. I'm going to talk a little bit about takeaways that you're going to get from this talk. We're going to talk about terminology, basically UX versus UI versus UXR. What do all these letters and numbers mean? We're going to get a little bit into how do we collect data? How can we maximize the benefit of our playtests and talking to our users to get really good insights that can help us drive improvements to the indie games that we're making. We're also going to talk about bias. This is a very important topic in user experience and psychology. And also trust and empathy and how we can connect to our users better and get better data from them when we're doing user experience studies. We're also going to talk about some interview protocols that or processes that you can use for your own indie tests if you're doing usability tests or play tests with your games. Some suggestions for further reading, and then a Q&A at the end. So without further ado, I'll kind of talk a little bit about myself. So I've been a professional game developer for about 20 years. Started off as a game designer, but then branched off into user experience about 15 years ago. I got my start here in Los Angeles. I used to work for Electronic Arts and Pandemic Studios on some of the old Medal of Honor games, and then one of the Lord of the Rings RTS games, specifically Battle for Middle-earth 2. And then I went over to Pandemic Studios and worked on the Mercenaries franchise. And it was at EA during this time period that I first got kind of my exposure into user experience design. They didn't call it user experience back then. They call it UI design, but that just adds to the confusion. I worked also with Capcom at a developer called Spark Unlimited from 2010 to 2013 on Lost Planet 3. And then I also had an opportunity to work with Sega on Sonic Boom on the Wii U with a developer called Big Red Button. I was kind of the lead UX designer on both of these projects. Between 2014 and 2018, I took a little bit of a hiatus from the games industry. I worked on a bunch of VR titles, but in 2018, I came back to Electronic Arts and joined the rebranded studio, which was now DICE Los Angeles, and I had an opportunity to contribute to both UX designs to both Battlefield 5, as well as more recently Jedi Fallen Order with Respawn. And then I recently left EA again, and I've joined Xbox Game Studios, specifically In Exile Entertainment. And I'm currently working on a top secret project that I can't really talk about, unfortunately. But this is just kind of like a little rundown of some of the games that I've worked on and some highlights from my career. So takeaways for this talk, for this masterclass, we want to give you an overview of the mindset and methods that UX researchers that they use to gather feedback and quality data and insights from users when they're doing testing. I want to help increase your interest or inspiration in learning more about UX and how UX best practices can benefit your indie games and help you make better games and better connect with your community and your audience. And then hopefully you'll get some ability or at least some interest to design your own UX protocols, how you interview with users, how you collect data that can help any type of project or any type of game or genre. I mean, it doesn't matter what type of genre that you're making. These types of experience, this type of research will help you connect to your audience better and better understand what they're thinking and feeling as they're playing their game and what their frustration points are. So if at any time anybody wants to ask a question, feel free to speak up. I tend to be a little bit long-winded, but if you've got a burning question that you want to ask, just feel free to speak up. And please be gentle, be kind. This is my first Twitch indie stream, so I'm a little bit of a noob. So, but anyways, so all right, so let's talk about UX versus UI and UXR. So user experience, kind of this common misconception is that user experience is the interface that you're interacting with, that it's just the buttons that are on the screen, it's the art that's on the screen, it's all the pretty icons and the text and everything like that. And while that is somewhat true, it's kind of missing the big picture of what UX really is. User interface UI is really kind of a subset of user experience. So kind of the metaphor that I like to use to teach this is UX is mainly function and how a piece of software or an experience works. You think about this is a chassis for a car, right? And it's probably got all the basic things that you need. It's got a place where you can sit. It's got 4 wheels. It's got it doesn't look like it has a steering wheel here, but ideally it would have one. And, but it just looks really bare bones, right? It would have a gas pedal, it would move you around, right? But user interface UI adds the emotion, how it looks and how it feels. I have a blue Mini that's kind of like this. Blue is my favorite color. And, without that, it's just kind of boring, right? But once you add kind of all the little details, all the touches, colors, that just makes it exciting, right? And fun. And so that's kind of a metaphor that I like to use to explain that, but doesn't quite convey the totality of what user experience is. So user experience also encompasses practices that we use to talk to our users to get insights about what they're thinking and feeling about our games, what they're doing with our games, things like that. It also encompasses the totality of how your studio or your team interacts with your audience, like whether it's through social media, your marketing, your outreach, basically like all of that sort of whole spectrum of interactions between you, your studio, your brand, and your audience. That also encompasses user experience. When you're working with the teams, there's also this process of design where you're gathering requirements, you're talking to engineers, you're designing kind of functional wireframes for what kind of like the moment-to-moment experience of going through your game is. And then, of course, also interacting with developers and programmers and putting it all together. And the end goal of all of this is to promote delight, is when you create an app or a game that people really love and it makes them feel happy. User experience, it's all going on in your brain because it's all of these efforts that they come together to make possible this moment, this delightful moment that you're providing for your audience and your community. So we're going to play a brief video here. This is from Don Norman. He's kind of a very prominent person in the user experience community, wrote a classic book called Design of Everyday Things. And he's just going to talk for a little bit about the term UX.
Hi, I'm Angie Lee, and I'm here at the UX conference in San Francisco. I got to ask Don Norman what he thinks about the term UX.
Once upon a time, a very long time ago, I was at Apple. And we said the experience of using these computers is weak. The experience, when you first discover it, when you see it in the store, when you buy it, when you, can't fit it into the car. It's in this great big box. It doesn't fit into the car. And when you finally do get it home, opening the box up and, it looks scary. I don't know if I dare put this computer together. All of that is user experience. It's everything that touches upon your experience with the product, and it may not even be near the product. It may be when you're telling somebody else about it. That's what we meant when we devised the term user experience and set up what we called the User Experience Architect's Office at Apple to try to enhance things. Now, Apple was already pretty good, so we were starting with a good product, making it even better. Today, that term has been horribly misused. It's used by people to say, I'm a user experience designer, I design websites, or I design apps, and they have no clues to what they're doing, and they think the experience is that simple device, the website, or the app, or who knows what. No, it's everything. It's the way you experience the world, it's the way you experience your life, it's the way you experience the service. Or, an app, or a computer system. But it's a system, it's everything. Got it?
So we learned a little bit from Don Norman about why, what is UX and stuff. And I just kind of wanted to share a little bit of an anecdote about why UX is important to me. So if you look at these 3 games and the various Metacritic ratings, what could you infer about the above games and UXR, right? So on Battlefield Middle-earth, this is one of the highest rated games I've worked on. They put a lot of effort into talking to the community. They had a community manager. They talked a lot about a lot of improvements that they wanted to make from the first game. And as a result, people really love that game. Even to this day, there's, people are still playing it because there isn't another RTS out there that really is, captures that epic scale of being in Lord of the Rings and being in the movies and such. Whereas like games like Lost Planet and even worse Sonic Boom, we didn't do any type of user research until like the very end of the project, or we brought in friends and family. And these were games that really missed the mark, and they didn't really connect with what it is that the community wanted or what the audience wanted. And as a result, there's a lot of things that go into a bad Metacritic, score, but basically the reason why UX is important is because if you do this, it's like insurance to make sure that your efforts are aligning to your community's needs and their feelings. And this is why your indie game can benefit from UXR or user research. So let's talk about modes and methods of data collection. How do we get this information from our users? So we often talk about like two categories of getting data, and they are quantitative and qualitative. So quantitative data often has to do with facts. These are things like numbers, true and false. These are basically reflecting things that users are doing, and they're often very objective in terms of it's kind of this objective truth that this thing really happened. Whereas qualitative is more open-ended. It's more about values, thoughts, opinions, and how users feel. And this type of feedback is often subjective. It differs from person to person. So it's different from getting the quantitative data. So there's a number of ways we can gather the data. Are they qualitative or quantitative? So surveys can potentially be used for both qualitative and quantitative. So it basically, it can be like scale 1 to 10. How fun did you think that game was? And that might be something that is more qualitative, right? But it might be like, did you die on level 5, or did you find where the power up was? And that might be something that is a yes or no question. So it can be both quantitative and qualitative. Interviewing is often a way of really getting very good qualitative data, really digging in and having this back and forth with people to really dig into their feelings and their emotions and how they're feeling about your game and things like that. Video is another tool that can augment that. That's often very useful. Usually you almost do interviews and videos hand in hand to record the findings and share them amongst people on your team. Heat maps are definitely much more of a quantitative type of feedback or data gathering method. This is usually, if you're making a game in Unity, you can customize where people are dying, or where people are finding the power up, or where people might be saving their game or quitting the game, things like that. Focus groups are another form of qualitative feedback that sometimes if you want to try to get a little bit of a mix of having lots of opinions and feedback at once, that's another way. It's kind of like an interview on steroids. And then finally, analytics is definitely like a quantitative method where, like heat maps, you're getting information about what users are doing, what your players are doing, and when, how long are they playing for, how many wish lists are we getting, things like that. And you can use all of these insights to drive improvements to your total user experience, whether it's the game, your marketing materials, etc. So when is it good to use qualitative versus quantitative? So we discussed that qualitative is how users feel. And this is usually better for smaller scale one-to-one or in-person methods of gathering info or observations. So, this is better when you're trying to understand the why behind people, why they chose to pick one game over the other, and what their internal emotions are like. One thing that can be, why it's important to use qualitative is, for example, somebody might be struggling with the game that they're playing, and you might assume that because they're dying and they're repeating and they're trying this part of the game over and over again, that they're struggling. But their engagement level might be really high. They may not be frustrated. They may be trying new things depending on the game. And even though they may not be progressing, they might be having a really good time. So that's why it's important to ask them about the qualitative data. how are they feeling? What were they thinking in this moment? Versus just kind of looking at what they're doing and saying, hey, they're dying a lot. That's kind of quantitative data, that's facts, but you don't know like if they're really engaged or if they're really bored. So that's why you need the qualitative. The quantitative, again, is what they do. And this is better for larger scale events where you have an existing community or lots of users available, such as public betas, early access playtests, where you can just get a ton of analytics at scale and being able to kind of quickly crunch those numbers and see kind of what people are doing. Make sure that you have analytics that are enabled first before you kind of do these big play tests so that you're maximizing that opportunity to get all of that data and crunch the numbers afterwards. That's how you can do the analysis. So the other thing that's really important is try to avoid reusing users and testers. And there's a reason for this. And this has to do with our next section, which is bias. So what is bias? So bias is sort of this cognitive blind spot that we all have. We all have our biases, right? And it's kind of how we cope with reality. Our brains are wired to try to fill in the blanks when we are dealing with limited pieces of information. And our biases predispose us towards thinking and feeling and acting in a certain way. And the reason why we are, like I mentioned earlier, is that we're biased because our brains fill in the blanks. This is something that's called gestalt theory. So, our brains can't help it. We just are naturally wired to fill in, connect the dots and fill in the blanks when we're presented with limited information. So, and when we have good UXR, good UX research practices, we try to mitigate it. And we try to remove false information that might be misleading and may lead us to faulty conclusions or bad data. So it's something that, we have to try to filter it out, even just like the way that we're asking questions and things like that, to make sure that we're really getting the most accurate insights from our users. So we're going to watch another video here. So I'm going to share that on the Discord. And this is a really cool video, and I think this really illustrates why bias can really lead us astray, and how strong our brains, like our tendency is to fill in the blanks. So Andrew, if you want to play that video or share that on the Twitch stream and just let me know when that's done.
All right.
We can
fire it up. This is Can You Solve This?
Can You Solve This from Veritasium.
I'm going to give you guys three numbers, a three-number sequence, and I have a rule in mind that these three numbers obey. And I want you to try to figure out what that rule is. But the way that you can get information is by proposing your own set of three numbers, to which I will say, yes, that follows my rule, or no, it doesn't follow my rule, and then you can propose what you think the rule is. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so here are the three numbers. 2, 4, 8.
2, 4, 8.
You don't need to continue the sequence. You can propose a totally different sequence, whatever you want to propose, and I will simply say yes or no. That follows my rule.
2, 4, 8. 16, 32.
16, 32, and
64.
those also follow my rule.
Okay.
What's the rule? What are you thinking?
Multiply by 2.
That is not my rule.
What?
That's not my rule. But you're allowed, if you want, propose three other numbers.
3, 6, 12.
3, 6, 12.
3, 6, 12 follows my rule.
10, 20, 40.
10, 20, 40.
That follows the rule.
Yeah, I'm still multiplying by 2.
I know. I know what you're doing. And yes, it follows my rule, but no, it's not my rule.
5, 10,
10 and 20.
Follows my rule.
100,
200. 400.
Follows my rule.
500, 1,000, 2,000.
Follows my rule.
Want me to keep going?
But do I just keep going? You're going to tell me your rule?
Am I doing it the wrong way? Am I approaching this the wrong way?
You're totally fine,
Okay.
but you're approaching it the way most people approach it. Like, think strategically about this. You want information.
Yeah.
I have information. The point of the three numbers, right, is to allow you to figure out what the rule is.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to give you the numbers that I don't think fits the sequence and then see what you say. So I'll say 2, 4, 7.
Fits my rule.
So whatever I propose is right?
So is your rule like you can propose any number?
So the rule is anything we say is yes.
No.
Damn it.
But you are on the right track now. Hit me with three numbers.
3, 6, 9.
Follows my rule.
Oh, that didn't follow my rule.
This is good, right?
5, 10, 15.
That follows my rule.
What? Oh. Really?
Yeah.
I don't believe this.
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
Follows the rule.
What about 7, 8, 9?
Follows. Yes, that follows the rule.
8, 16, 39.
Fits the rule.
Excellent.
But we're no closer to the rule. I want you to get to the rule. How about 1, 7, 13? Follows the rule.
What?
11, 12, 13.
How does this
follows
make
the rule.
sense?
10,
I don't
9,
know how
8
to do this.
Does not follow the rule. 10, 9, 8 does not.
Oh, so is it all in ascending order?
Booyah.
Okay.
Up top. Yes, first
that
ones
what it
to get
is?
it. You guys nailed it. That's the rule. That's
always
the rule. Increase numbers in increasing order.
Aw.
Numbers in ascending order.
Oh, so much
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 15, 25. Doesn't matter. Any numbers in ascending order. I was inspired to make this video by the book The Black Swan by Nassim Taleb. Now, the black swan is a metaphor for the unknown and the unexpected. I mean, in the old world, the theory was that all swans were white. So each instance of a white swan would make you think, yeah, that theory's pretty good. But the point is, you can never prove a theory true. And in fact, when people found Australia, they realized that there were black swans. What was interesting for me was that everyone I spoke to came up with a rule very early on and then only proposed numbers that fit with that rule they were thinking. I was looking for you guys to propose a set of numbers that didn't follow your rule and didn't follow my rule. I was looking for you guys not to try to confirm what you believe. You're always asking something where you expect the answer to be yes, right? Like you're trying to get at it.
But instead you want to get the no.
You want to get the no because that's much more informational for you than the yes. Like if everything's
No,
giving
that
a
is
yes.
true. That is really true once you say that.
That is what's so important about the scientific method. We set out to disprove our theories. And it's when we can't disprove them that we say, this must be getting at something really true about our reality. So I think we should do that in all aspects of our lives. If you think that something is true, you should try as hard as you can to disprove it. Only then can you really get at the truth and not fool yourself.
So, like, did a lot of people get that rule? Like, do you see, like, how just that introducing that little bit of leading information of 248 really skewed the results of that? Everybody thought that. And just the power of that insight of understanding the thing that doesn't confirm your bias, that is where the truth lies. And once people got that insight was so much more valuable than just hearing the same things over and over again. So that's why it's very important to think about bias, and in terms of when you're talking to your users, being very careful about what you're introducing, like so that you're getting like a real read on it, or they're going to give you like an unexpected insight that maybe you've completely overlooked because you've been working on the same game for months, if not years, and you're too close to it, right? So we're just going to quickly go over just some common cognitive biases to be aware of. So one of them is the recruiting, how you recruit participants. So one of them is selection bias, and selection bias is when you're picking a group of people that is not truly random, right? Or it's not random enough, right? Or so you have to be careful about making sure that you're getting people that are interested in your game, but you also might need to get people that might not otherwise consider your game, and maybe there might be that sort of unexpected insight that may prove to be like really, really helpful for you improving your game. This other one is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, the friends and family bias. So this is one of the things that we didn't do very well on Sonic Boom. We just brought in friends and family. And the problem is that your friends and family, they want you to see you do well. So they're a little bit less likely maybe to be harsh with you. They might be really, they like you, and they may not, but the thing is that they are not your audience. They're not the people who are going to pay you money. They're not going to buy your game, right? They're not your community necessarily. So it's important to be careful about who you're recruiting to play your game. When you're recording data, when you're doing a usability study, there's a couple of biases you have to think about. One of them is the observer effect. Sometimes people, just by the act of knowing that they're being watched, they will behave differently. They might even say things they don't even mean that are not true because they don't want to hurt your feelings, right? Because you're another person. So that's something to be aware of, just the act of observing somebody playing your game. can potentially introduce bias. The bandwagon effect is another bias where this is basically like people are lemmings. We tend to think what other people think or be influenced very easily by other people or follow the crowd. You tend to see this in a lot of focus groups where it's like one or two or three loud people. They tend to dominate the discussion. And then other people, they may not speak up, or they may just kind of agree with them. So that's something to also be aware of. And then when you're in doing the analysis, right, looking at the data and trying to come up with what are the insights, what are the actions that we're going to do, how are we going to change the game based on our testing that we've done. Confirmation bias is something to be aware of. That's basically when you're only looking for data that confirms your beliefs. It's like these people, they're looking for numbers that are multiplying by 2. And that's because the confirmation bias is so strong. They want to, and they're kind of missing the point there. Anchoring bias is kind of like where you might see like an initial bit of information and you start to use the first bits of information that you get, and you're saying, okay, that must be the thing that's true. And then clustering illusion bias is basically when you're starting to make connections between a lot of data, but you might be making the inference that this is true, but it's really just random, right? It's coincidence. It's not causality. So these are just some biases. There's a whole lot of cognitive biases, but these are just some of the ones to be immediately aware of. So let's talk more about trust and empathy in qualitative research. So empathy is basically, the ability or capacity to feel what your users are feeling, to understand, where are the parts of the game that they're really struggling with? What are the things they like? What don't they like? When you have high empathy, it's almost like your sense of self is much lower, and you're really connecting with what your audience is feeling and what they're thinking and what they're doing. And it's absolutely essential in user experience practices that we have to have empathy for our customers and our users. I say this a lot in kind of my day job, but game developers, we very much want to make games for ourselves that please ourselves. But we have to remember that this is a business and that we are making games for an audience that's going to pay money for our art and our work. So it's essential to have empathy to be able to connect to your community, your customers, and to be able to get those truthful insights. NLP is abbreviation for neuro-linguistic programming. This is kind of like sort of this pseudo psychotherapeutic hack that you can use to deepen trust and establish rapport with your users. If you're like in an interview type scenario, or maybe you're talking to people online, and it's a way, whether you're mimicking body language or reiterating something using the same words as them and maintaining eye contact with the audience. This is kind of a subconscious way of you communicating to the person you're talking to. Hey man, I'm on your planet. I'm part of your tribe. I understand what you're thinking and feeling. I have empathy for you. So it's very important to use these hacks in order to kind of leverage empathy so that somebody's not going to clam up and that they're going to give you the real scoop, the real information. And it's just being in the moment, being responsive and attentive to things that you're noticing, seeing. We're not going to try this now. I've given this talk before in live, and this is something I forgot to take out. So let's talk a little bit about some qualitative interview protocols. I'm kind of fond of this metaphor of an hourglass. So let's say you're bringing somebody in, or maybe you're talking to somebody online as they're playing your game, maybe over like a 45-minute to an hour period, and you're watching them. And what you want to do is at the beginning of this process, you want to establish a scenario and manage expectations for time. Like, how long is this test going to take? What's going to happen in it? Et cetera, et cetera. And at this point, at this part, it's really important to ask broad, open value questions, because it's all about getting your users to open up and feel comfortable, whether it's in person or now we're doing everything virtually. Hopefully, we're not going to be doing this for too much longer. But it's just about getting people to open up and start to share insights and feeling comfortable with you as a person. And in this point in the protocol, in the interview, data is not as important as building the rapport and the trust. The data will come later, but at this point, it's really just about getting to connect with that person. Kind of in the middle of the interview, this is really where you're looking to get the data. This is where they're playing their build. Maybe you're putting up an interface screen and you got a bunch of icons, and you might be asking, what is it that you're seeing? Like, what does this mean to you? Or you might be asking about, a new mechanic that you're introducing. Do people understand it? Are they bored? Are they feeling challenged? Things like that. And kind of in the middle of the interview, that's really where you want to zoom in on those questions that you're trying to get the answers for. One framework that I'm fond of is called 5 Whys. And the idea is that we'll go into it in a little bit, but it's like a truth finding framework. Like if there's a problem, ask the reason why the problem exists 5 times, and that will get you to the root cause versus superficial things. And then at the end of the interview, you really want to return to broader open value questions. And as you wrap it up, ask people about their opinions, their feelings, but sometimes one thing I like to do is say, hey, is there something that we haven't talked about, that I haven't asked you about, that you'd like to share, that you really, really want to share your thoughts and opinions? That's actually a really critical question, because just by asking these questions, we're introducing bias. And so, leaving it an open-ended, hey, you can say whatever you want, that's when you can potentially get an insight that you may not expect. And it's like that black swan again. That unexpected insight might be really the thing that's going to help you improve your game or fix some aspect of the game that maybe you're struggling with. Real quick, what does a scenario look like? So when you're setting up this interview protocol and you're trying to set the stage for what a user is going to go through, it's basically a short story, and it's about this is the goal that you're going to do. We want you to try to take a quest and get some rewards and then upgrade your character. That's your goal. But there's a couple of tasks along the way. So you want to kind of state what's going on, context, what are the people in this scenario? Are there NPCs that you're talking to? Are you playing with other people online? Identify the agents, the things that can potentially change. Again, the goals, what is it that we're asking you to do? The tasks, the things that you have to do to reach that goal along the way. And then things that may happen while you're going along. So this is just a quick example of a scenario. And I'm not going to read it verbatim, but basically the idea is that you say, hey, you're going to try something out today. It's not fully functional. There may be restrictions or bugs. But, as you're going through this, we're going to record your interactions. We're going to make some observations. Please vocalize your thoughts. Don't feel like you're going to hurt my feelings. We're here to hear everything that you have to tell us about our game. So please be open and honest. And then you manage the expectations for time. This might take 30 minutes. It might take 45 minutes. It might take an hour. And there's going to be a nice giveaway or a gift for your time. Maybe you'll come back and do a play test with us later. And then you sort of start the scenario, right? And say, okay, imagine this would be like a multiplayer game and you're just been match made with a bunch of people. And the map loading process is done and you're at this screen. And you're going to make some selections before you start playing. This might be equipping a loadout, or in a MOBA, picking which heroes are going to go on which team, things like that. So you might have a prototype for that. So this would be how you're kind of putting users in that mindset of, hey, I'm in this game, I'm in this part of the game, and this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So we talked a little bit earlier about the truth finding framework, the 5 Whys. So as this example, imagine that the office computers are breaking down, and you might ask okay, well, why are they breaking down? It's because they're old, right? And so if you just replace the computers, right, or the software's not compatible, maybe you update it, you might still keep getting the same problem again. So when you're in these interviews, asking why 5 times can really dig down to the root cause, because if you dig in here, it says, well, why are the computers old and the software is incompatible? Well, they haven't been purchased in a while. Well, why haven't they been purchased? Well, IT's got a small budget. Why does IT have a small budget? Well, the manager in charge has not made the case to increase the budget. Why hasn't he done that? Because the manager hasn't been trained. So it's you can buy the new software and the new computers, but unless the manager has been trained about managing, then this problem is very likely still going to happen. So that's why it's important to get to the root cause of why people might be feeling or thinking a certain way, to figure out where the real problem is. So it's just about, again, getting people to open up. This is another protocol that I would really recommend. It's called rocket surgery. This is from an author called Steve Krug. And this is a really lightweight, sustainable way for you to do usability tests with people for your game. So the idea behind it is that you have a 1-hour interview with a fresh user, right? You bring in somebody who's never played your game before, so you can get, they're not biased. They don't have leading information from earlier builds and such. So you bring them in, you do the 1-hour interview with them, and you have in a remote observation room or someplace else, you have other people on your team are watching. They're watching your user interact with your build of your software. This is super crucial for getting those insights that are going to drive improvements in your game. Because again, the developers, they're super close to the work that they do. You're too biased, you've lost your objectivity, and this is an opportunity for them to reconnect with what users are really doing, what they're really struggling with, and how they're reacting to it. Cake and snacks are always nice. This is a way you can kind of keep your team interested. Hopefully one day we'll go back to having cake and snacks together. And repeat this 3 times. You can get value out of this process with just as little as 3 users for 1 hour each. And after you do this, then you get your team together, you do a debrief, and you decide what the action items are. And just the act of having your team observe somebody who has never played your game before is going to, it's like light bulbs are going to go off on top of their heads. They'll immediately kind of be like, oh my God, like look how much that person struggled with that part of the game that I thought was working perfectly. Or I thought that icon was completely clear, and they're completely missing what that means. Oh my God, we got to change things. So this is actually a super insightful process, and I'd really recommend reading the book and checking it out. A couple other tips, and we're almost about to wrap up. When you're talking to an interviewee, just always show respect and gratitude. Make them feel comfortable. Do not judge any opinions. You just have to have the attitude that like all the data, it's all good. Like be super grateful that people are there and they're taking the time to play your game and to share that information. Try not to overload them with questions. Just kind of stick with one question at a time. Make sure you're guiding the conversation to encourage sharing. If they're kind of clamming up, try to kind of probe a little bit and see to make sure that if they're uncomfortable with something, like get them to open up. But always think about bias. Do not ask leading or value-laden questions. Do not ask like, oh, how awesome was that boss fight? And, the person might be like, no, actually, it really wasn't good. But if you kind of, you have to almost take this robotic kind of semi-scientific approach to talking to people. Because if you say, oh, how awesome was it? And the person's really thinking it really wasn't that good, they might be like, it's okay. When they're really thinking like, no, it wasn't that good, because you're kind of introducing bias into it in terms of you're introducing leading information here. Do not interrupt people. Do not stop their flow. Just let them keep the insights coming. And always be curious. Sometimes it's good to go off script if they say something interesting or unexpected. Use the 5 whys, ask good questions, probe deeper. And then it's always good to reiterate, clarify, confirm their responses before moving on. Make sure that they feel like that they're being listened. Again, with the NLP, repeat the things that they're saying, use the same words, do not paraphrase. And of course, record the interview. And then, and again, resist the urge to interpret. You have to remain in observation mode. We have to, again, watch out for those biases, such as the clustering bias or, confirmation bias or clustering illusions, right? Like make sure that or anchoring effect, right? Like make sure that you're just absorbing the information. Do not interpret until you get the big picture. So, and when you're generating the analysis, this is how you can persuade others, and this is how you can advocate for your customers. If you're talking to your publisher, if you're talking to investors, like showing how people are really reacting to your game can really give you that edge that it indicates that like, hey, you're making improvements, you're driving improvements to the game, and this is a product that people want and that they're actually going to pay money for. So it's very important to illustrate methodology. You can't just say like, hey, I did a user test with my keys. It was a good time. It's really like you want to increase the validity and the trust that this is a process that was scientific and you're filtering out bias and that these insights are true. So the quantitative findings are very easy to calculate. This you could do like a Survey Monkey. You can, dump all the numbers into Excel. You can crunch it. You can make a chart. Those are oftentimes the appetizer, but again, they are kind of lacking the motivating emotional reasons and the why. They're lacking the qualitative findings, and those can be, if you have to go through an interview, like a script or a recording to try to pull out those insights, that's more time consuming, but it's worth it. So think about it as like the appetizer and the main dish. Both of these types of data are important to kind of establish like the big picture of what's going on, how people are reacting to your game. You can segment and filter data, but make sure to be like open-minded to the unexpected findings. You might find like, hey, people who are in this age group or this demographic, their engagement numbers are much higher. They want to play longer. They're more likely to purchase. They're more likely to recommend. So you may not expect that, but that might be ultimately, you may want to make decisions based on that and cater aspects of your game design or your art, any number of things to, hey, our game is resonating with a different group of people. Again, that's why it's good for the recruiting, thinking about the recruiting bias and not making sure that you're getting, random people, right? Be open to the unexpected. Summarize your recommendations, base it on the data. And of course, it's always good to be data informed, but not necessarily data driven. We want to have these insights, but ultimately you've got to make the decision considering all the factors, like what's going on with your project, your team, your budget, your resources, your schedule, all that stuff. So it's super important to be informed, but don't be a slave to the data. Just make sure that you have it. So, okay, we're almost done. So just for further reading, Thinking Fast and Slow. This is a book about kind of that gestalt theory, how we fill in the blanks, bias, etc. Field Guide to Human-Centered Design is also another good one. Rocket Surgery Made Easy is the protocol that we discussed. That's a super lightweight book. Really recommend it. Design of Everyday Things from Don Norman. Total classic. It just goes over industrial design, how to make things intuitive, how, kind of the cognitive science behind everything. You'll never look at doorknobs the same way again after you're reading this book. And then The Black Swan, which was the book from the Veritasium video of figuring out the rule. These are all the books that I would really recommend. All right, that's it. Thanks so much for your time. At this point, I'd love to open it up to maybe a discussion and kind of see if people have questions about things or feedback, anything that you guys want to talk about. All ears. Andrew, you there?
Yep, I'm here. So you have a question from Fabry Sounds on the 5 whys. How do you manage to avoid people getting pissed after the third why? I feel like you ask the same question too often and they tend to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, that's again where it's empathy is important, because you have to be able to kind of, do they seem irritated? Do they seem frustrated? Generally speaking, I find that people really want to be heard. They want to voice their opinion about things, and they want to feel like that they're understood. So the way I kind of look at it is that this is kind of like a sampling of a grab bag. Like, there are different tools that can be leveraged at different times. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to use 5 whys, but if there's a problem, maybe ask a couple of whys, kind of see okay, are you really understanding kind of the root cause of the problem here about why somebody might be frustrated or why a certain mechanic may not be working? So, it's a grab bag. It's just about being flexible and adaptable. It's really important just to have the empathy and kind of be in tune with what the person is feeling and just use your best judgment.
Indies have limited time and or money. What's some quick wins that they can get for improving their product?
Yeah, again, this is really where I come back to that rocket surgery protocol. Is you need 3 people and an hour of their time, and just sit them down in front of your game and let them play. I would imagine a lot of indies, they've got Discord servers, they're giving out codes. I had a chat with somebody who has an indie game, and we talked about me potentially helping him out. And I told him about the book, gave him some advice. So it does the misconception is that it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be time consuming. You can do it. You can keep it sustainable. You can keep it lightweight. Some data that is, reasonably sourced is better than no data at all. Like, at least you're connecting with somebody who is resembles your target audience, and they can give you some insights about what is and isn't working. So even with as few as like 3 people is going to be useful. But again, UX is not just about interviews. It's also about heat maps and analytics, and just being able to get the data, both the qualitative and the quantitative data, see what users are doing. So yeah, so I think all those methods are possible. Don't make the assumption that just because you're an indie that you don't have the ability to do this.
Just don't be scared, jump on in. I guess for like a quick follow-up on that is should you usually wait until you have like an alpha phase? Like at what level of polish should you wait before you jump into this, or do you just hone like a vertical slice and test those as you go?
I think you can get useful insights even just with like static mockups or icons, documents. Like, I would say it's better to get that information early on. Test early, test often is a very kind of common mantra. And so I would definitely recommend at any stage. But certainly I could understand, in the organic process of game development that, yeah, it may make sense to wait until it's, you can get it in the hands of people and there's some obvious friction points or rough things that are sanded down and such, So I would definitely, use your best judgment, but don't assume that it has to be super polished and have the best graphics in order for you to get it in front of people and get those insights.
I love it. And thank you so much. That was great.
Yeah. So, all right. Are there other questions?
All right. I think we made it.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for listening to me drone on and on about. I hope you guys learned something and it was interesting. So, feel free to reach out to me. I think I put my contact details up there, but I'd happy to post them if you're interested in talking more about UX and games and, how we can make our indie games better. So happy to help, have an opportunity to share my insights with you. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Awesome. Yeah, it was great having you. And we have your information up, and if anything pops up, I'll also tag you on Discord and for the social media posts that we had going out. So thank you again, and thanks everyone for checking it out. And I think we have some other late night streams coming up, so hang in there. We'll keep the party moving.
Okay, cool. All right.
All right,
Keep the dream alive, guys. Good luck. Bye-bye.